when that day arrived. I was preparing to head home for the new year, but the city I lived in was hit by a sudden blizzard. And the temperature plummeted drastically. I originally felt lucky to have snagged a train ticket, unaware that this was a train heading straight into a freezing apocalypse. February 8th, 4 p.m. I was tax unable et mauvais. On the day of my departure, the whole city encountered a massive snowstorm. I had packed my luggage and gone to the station early, hoping to arrive ahead of time and find a seat in the waiting hall. But unexpectedly, ticket check hadn't even started, and I was completely blocked at the entrance. Meanwhile, it was still snowing heavily, and it seemed to be getting worse. There were too many people traveling for the holiday. The crowd slowly turned into a solid human wall. No one realized the danger that was falling from the sky. All the trains are delayed today. My wife just checked online for me. All the trains to our hometown are cancelled, except for this last one. But they can't just let us freeze outside like this. It's colder than the dead of winter. Iringti. I took my phone out of my pocket to check the tickets. Sure enough, sales for my train had also been suspended. My phone battery was dropping rapidly, so I put it back. I tightly gripped it with my hands to warm it up. I didn't want to miss the last train home. So I had no choice but to keep waiting in line. At first, I could still hold on. But it was just too cold, and I was freezing numb. I don't know how much time passed, but I was pushed apart by the crowd. I took 2 steps forward, sensing that a protest had broken out in the line. The commotion around me was getting louder and louder. Before I could even react, the people behind me started violently shoving forward. I tried to scream at the top of my lungs. But because I had been freezing outside for so long, my speech was slurred. It wasn't until I helplessly watched the terrified face of the girl in front of me being pushed down. Someone's being trampled. People were blindly pushing forward, anxiously squeezing into the gaps. Humanity's negative emotions exploded in an instant. I fiercely hugged my suitcase to my chest, slammed to the left, and managed to struggle my way out of the line. Those who reacted slower weren't so lucky. Some couldn't stand properly, while others fell to the ground. The crowd behind them crushed in like a landslide. Not daring to stop, I turned and ran straight toward the station's overpass. After getting off the bridge, I took out my phone to hail a ride. The queue for a taxi was over 200 people long, and my freezing phone was down to 15% battery. I didn't care about the price anymore. I selected every single premium car type available. After placing the order, I quickly shoved my phone back into my pocket. Just when my battery dropped to 2%, I successfully booked a 6-seat premium minivan. The driver navigated through the chaos and arrived 5 minutes late. After getting in, I charged my phone and immediately called my parents. I told them I wouldn't be able to make it home for the new year, and quickly hung up. Thinking about the bizarre weather and what I just experienced, a strong sense of unease welled up inside me. "Sir, I'll pay double the fare. Let's head to the biggest outdoor supply store nearby first." I directly asked for the store's best insulated sleeping bags and bought several types of winter clothing. I also prepared for power by buying and gas outages, cassette stoves to boil water and cook, along with a fire axe for self-defense, etc. Because I bought so many things. The store clerk helped me carry them to the car. Before leaving, I urged her to stock up on winter supplies too. But looking at the gradually increasing number of customers, the girl didn't seem to take it to heart. I looked at the completely darkened sky. Didn't try to persuade her anymore and turned to get into the car. I already had enough food at home to last me 3 months. So I didn't plan to waste any more energy worrying about food. Instead, I directed the driver to a nearby pharmacy. Besides colds and fevers, extreme weather can easily trigger cardiovascular and blood supply problems. I had to get these specific medicines from the pharmacy. I quickly bought 4 boxes of essential medical kits, including some basic medications. After buying all this, the snow outside was blowing so hard it obscured the road. Even right in front of us, the driver didn't dare to speed up. Seeing me hoard so much stuff gave him the creeps. He just wanted to finish this ride and go home for the new year. After getting off, the driver voluntarily helped me carry my things to my apartment building. I was initially on guard, wondering if he wanted to steal my supplies. But to my surprise, he was genuinely helping me. My eyes grew hot, and I wanted to give him a piece of winter clothing. He smiled and shook his head. "Keep it for yourself, little girl. If something really bad happens, and you give me one, neither of us will have enough to survive." Finally, he waved his hand, turned around, and walked away. As long as I can be with my family, that's good enough for me. The driver walked away into the blizzard. His figure was instantly swallowed by the surrounding darkness. I could only see his headlights shining in the distance, until they completely disappeared into the heavy snow. I looked down at my phone. The last message was a list of medicines I sent to my family group chat half an hour ago. No one in the group had replied. I couldn't help but let my imagination run wild. But after just 2 seconds, I sniffled my frozen nose and started dealing with the supplies piled up at the entrance. Reality told me that, no matter how you look at it, my situation was the worst among us. I needed to survive first, before hoping for a reunion. On s'incide. The warmth of my apartment dispelled the chill from my body. I cooked a hot bowl of lucifin noodles. Just then, a video call from my parents came through. On screen, they proudly showed me their hoarded goods from today. Aside from the list I provided, they had even bought a ton of coal and solar generators. All right, the joke was on me. My parents told me that the temperature there had dropped to -50 degrees today. It was the same back in my hometown, hit by a sudden blizzard, with temperatures plummeting since I lived alone. I absolutely couldn't let my guard down. Here, the lowest temperature was only -37 degrees, and the central heating was still working, but that didn't mean the city's heating system could withstand the pressure of -50 or 60 degrees later on. I needed to prepare early, while things were still okay. After hanging up, I sealed all the windows in the apartment with tape and set up the solar charging panels. Then, I cleared and flattened my bed and pitched a tent right on top of it. I put a moisture-proof mat and a sleeping bag inside. The extra sleeping bags were placed near the bed, so I could easily wrap myself up anytime. I kept one set of winter clothing inside the tent, and the rest beside the bed. I put the cassette stove on a small table near the tent exit. If it got too cold later, I could move it inside the tent. The gas canisters for the stove were extremely important. They could only be stored at a maximum of minus 20 degrees. So, I just brought them all into the tent. Finally, I turned the apartment upside down and calculated that my food and water were enough to last 3 months. By the time I finished packing everything, it was already 4 a.m. I decided to just pull an all-nighter and planned to grab a final wave of supplies online at 6 a.m. So stay awake. I opened my phone and started scrolling through TikTok. At first, the content seemed normal, until a user with a posted a video of a snowy landscape. It was snowing in tropical Hainan. People in the comments were all marveling at how beautiful the snow was, planning to go take photos tomorrow. Only a few users were wailing. Tuts 0 degree, damp cold was bearable. I refreshed the page, and suddenly, it was flooded with videos of temperature drops nationwide. Everyone was realizing something was horribly wrong with the weather. At 6 a.m., the online supermarket finally opened. I placed another order for some supplies on my phone. Having completed my final task, I reached out to touch the radiator. It wasn't as hot as it was last night. I quickly crawled into the tent and fell asleep. The very next second, I was awakened by the freezing cold. Checking my phone, the temperature had plummeted to minus 49 degrees. The groceries I ordered came still out for delivery. I didn't even need to look out the window. There wasn't a single person on the street, just a vast whiteness. The wind was howling louder and louder. I drew the curtains and started making food, because the kitchen wasn't as well insulated as my bedroom. I moved the electric pot into my bedroom and cooked myself a pack of instant noodles, gulping down the hot soup. The chill inside me gradually dissipated, but just as I was getting settled, I had assumed that with the temperature drop over the past 2 days, everyone would just stay at home. Unexpectedly, right after I finished eating, my security door was suddenly pounded on. The door was being knocked on very loudly. Who would be knocking on my door in this godful weather? I had read plenty of post-apocalyptic novels, and I knew well that human nature, under extreme conditions, is far more terrifying than the disaster itself. Afraid the noise would attract more people, I grabbed an electric pot and my fire axe and went to the door. Wait! The person outside heard me speak and immediately yelled back impatiently. What's wrong with you, girl? I've been knocking forever. The community is organizing a snow clearing effort. Volunteers can get a jug of soybean oil and a carton of egg. Are you signing up or not? And voila-t. I joined the snow clearing squad downstairs, fully geared up. There weren't many people left in our residential compound. The young people had long gone to their hometowns for the new year. The ones remaining were mostly old folks, waiting for their kids and grandkids to come back today. Clearing the snow actually worked at first. The piled snow at the building entrance was reduced by more than half. But soon, the snow started falling heavier and heavier, eventually feeling like it was just dumping from the sky. The community workers handed out our supplies early and told us to hurry back home. I originally thought everyone was sweeping snow just for the free eggs and oil. But it turned out a few stubborn old men absolutely refused to leave. They insisted on continuing to clear the path. My wife and I are waiting for our son and daughter-in-law to come back for the New Year's Eve dinner. if you don't let me sweep the snow? How will the kids find their way home? My body was practically the same as the snow outside. I just wanted to get home as fast as possible. Once home, I boiled a pot of hot water, immediately took off my freezing clothes, turned on the electric blanket, and crawled into my sleeping bag inside the tent. It took a long time before I finally warmed up. Today was New Year's Eve. Usually, my family would prepare 8 or 10 dishes to celebrate the arrival of the new year. But obviously, I didn't have the conditions for that now. After thinking for a moment, I took a bag of frozen dumplings from the fridge. For a northerner, it's only a real new year if there are dumplings. As I ate the dumplings, Première Brossette, a home anti-cold survival guide posted online. The entire guide was extremely detailed, ranging from drinking ginger water for warmth to storing medicines. Everything was listed very clearly. I quickly hit save. But this extreme cold had descended so suddenly. Even with a survival guide, getting actual supplies was a whole other challenge. I opened my phone to check the temperature. It was already minus 49.8 degrees. I guessed it would drop below minus 50 tonight. My home actually wasn't far from a large supermarket. Just a 5-minute walk. Although my current supplies were definitely enough for 3 months. What if the temperature didn't rise back up after 3 months? So, I needed to take action. I dressed up carefully, fully geared and layered, and finally tucked my fire axe into my belt. And so, at 9:30 p.m. on New Year's Eve, Première des Doutes, the blizzard that blew in the evening was even more violent than the afternoon. Dust and snow mixed together, hard as shards of glass, whipping violently against my face. Now I finally understood what minus 50 degrees truly meant. Arriving at the supermarket, the ready-to-eat food on the shelves had long been swept clean. Even the mannequins had their down jackets stripped off. This was all within my expectations. I picked up some things others had ignored, like small household fire extinguishers, Vaseline, faucets, and so on. Première grabed, the very last bit of food, threw 200 yuan at the counter, and prepared to head home. The journey back was even harder. Annie Exposé's skin felt like it was being slashed by a knife over and over. I don't know how long I walked, but I finally made it home. I took off my jacket, dived straight into my warm sleeping bag, and fell into a deep sleep. I slept all the way until 9 a.m. the next day. My phone showed the temperature was now minus 62 degrees. I put on my clothes and got ready to cook. I casually touched the radiator. It was ice cold. The central heating was no longer working, while my steak was sizzling on low heat. I reinforced the insulation of my tent one more time. At ce moment, my clé died. Fortunately, there was still electricity, though I had no idea how much longer it would last. After eating and drinking my fill, I shrank back into the tent with the electric blanket on. Just as I was dozing off, there was a knock on the door. I instantly became alert, walked softly to the door, and looked out through the peephole. The community auntie who organized the snow clearing was standing right outside my door, stomping her feet and blowing on her hands for warmth. Seeing her like this, I quickly opened the door. She wasn't like last time, complaining about me opening the door. Slowly, she handed me a bag of rice. Premier Sonoti said. She had quite a few supplies placed behind her. My heart warmed up. But before I could thank her, she stated the purpose of her visit. The community requires each building to elect a building manager. The manager for our building is the woman from room 302. When her child was in school, she was awarded excellent parent for years. This shows she's a very responsible person. You should fully support her work from now on. The manager's task is actually quite simple. To check the neighbors' temperatures every day and their supply status. If there are any problems, report them immediately, and we will figure out a solution together. The auntie left right after explaining. But as I closed the door, I felt a vague sense of dread. In the face of disaster, could we really withstand the test of human nature? Tatveri Dai, the resident of rooms 3 and Gotika. This building manager truly lived up to her title. As an excellent parent, acting very seriously and responsibly, she braved the freezing wind, knocking on doors one by one. When she reached the 8th floor, the first 2 apartments she knocked on had no response. Until she persistently knocked on the 3rd family's door. And someone finally answered. I tried hard to recall the people I had seen during the snow clearing effort earlier. It had been so cold back then. I just wanted to go home quickly. I vaguely remembered a young couple who entered the building right behind me. But as to which floor they stopped on, I really didn't have an impression while I was trying to remember. The noise on the 8th floor suddenly stopped. I quickly tiptoed back to my bedroom and then, pretending I just heard her, I yelled out, "Coming." After opening the door, the person who met my eyes was much younger than I expected. Her face was flushed red from the cold. Nam. I made up a fake name, Iron Egg. She wrote it down very seriously. After registering my name, she pulled an electronic thermometer from her pocket, pointed it at my forehead, and recorded the reading. Then she spoke again. "It's freezing. A girl like you shouldn't go out if you don't have to. If you need anything, come find me in room 302. For my work, going forward, I'll need the cooperation of all the residents here. Please cooperate." "Okay," she waved her hand, signaling me to close the door. I thanked her repeatedly before closing it. After shutting the door, I pretended to walk back to my bedroom, but quietly snuck right back to the door. It was dead quiet out in the hallway. Feeling suspicious, I couldn't help but peek through the peephole. A magnified eye suddenly appeared right in front of me. I looked closer. It was the building manager from just now. She was still standing in front of my door, staring inside. My whole body went stiff. She stood there for about a minute before turning to knock on my neighbor's door. You can never be too careful around others. I had to set up some security measures at my door. To be honest, I didn't even really know who lived next door to me. I used to leave early for work and come home late, so I rarely ran into any neighbors. She knocked on room 901, but it was the door to room 903 that opened. The person who opened the door was an old lady. I actually had a slight impression of her. Once, at 6 a.m., her son and daughter-in-law were leaving for work. and their little granddaughter couldn't bear to see them go. Crying her heart out. I thought someone was kidnapping a child. So I cracked my door open to see what was going on. The old lady thought I was angry about the noise and hurriedly apologized and explained. Seeing that everything was fine, I closed my door and went back to sleep. Right now, the old lady was reporting her family situation to the building manager. Her son's family had gone to her daughter-in-law's hometown for the new year. Now, it was just her and her husband living there. The manager routinely took her temperature, repeated the same speech she gave me, and turned to leave. When the hallway finally fell silent, I brought my fire axe, fire extinguisher, and other tools, placing them right by the door, so I could grab them conveniently, if necessary. Over the next few days, I zoomed from 3 not my door. Because it was the new year, there really weren't many residents left in the building. Not even 10 people in total. Even she was living alone. Saying her husband and kid went out of town for the holiday. On the night of the 6th day of the new year, our building's power went out. Première mauvaise dalle, the supplies I had hoarded into the tent, stuck heat packs all over my body, and bundled up completely in the sleeping bag. But in the face of absolute freezing cold, the heat packs were practically useless. It wasn't until dawn broke that I finally dared to use the cassette stove to boil some hot water. I also cooked some millet that the grandma from 903 had given me. I counted my remaining gas canisters. I only had about 20 left. Even if I stretched it, I'd need 3 a day. So I could only last for a week. Luckily, the temperature rose slightly during the day. I took advantage of the slight warmth to catch up on sleep. I would figure out the supply situation after I slept enough. Unexpectedly, not long after I fell asleep, my door was heavily pounded on. Did the manager seriously come out in this cold right now? Just getting out of bed was a massive struggle, let alone standing in a drafty hallway. I wasn't planning on opening the door, but the knocking outside was incessant. The noise was giving me a headache, so I had to get out of bed. Through the peephole, it was indeed the building manager. She had checked up on me a lot over these past few days. But because she had stood outside my door, refusing to leave that one time, a seed of suspicion had been planted in my mind. I picked up the fire axe by the door. Suddenly, a gust of cold wind blew through, and the door to room 903 slowly creaked open. The door wasn't locked. Not locking the door in this weather was basically a death sentence. As the woman from 300 bent over to close my neighbor's door, a corner of the sweater underneath her coat was exposed. Instantly, the hairs on my arms stood up. When Grandma from 903 had given me the millet, I felt extremely guilty. So I went home and grabbed some heat packs and a bag of frozen dumplings, stuffing them into her arms. The old lady pushed them back with a big smile. Shield. You keep this. At our age, we don't eat much anyway. You're a young girl stuck out of town in this cold. If you starve on top of that, your parents would be so worried. This sweater was knitted by my daughter-in-law. It's very warm. Look here, sweetie. She even embroidered my name on it. I looked at the flower embroidered on it. Tilted me after a while. I guessed, is it a lily? The old lady stopped, smiling. She looked quite speechless at my guess. It's a magnolia. And no, that very magnolia sweater was being worn by the woman from 302. thinking of that kind old couple in 903. Hot tears uncontrollably welled up in my eyes. I clenched my jaw tight, not daring to make a single sound. I watched as the woman from 300 to close their door quietly returned to my door and slowly leaned in close. Seeing that there was really no movement from me, she muttered, "Fine, I can't stand it anyway." I waited, "I'm leaving," until I heard the sound of the stairwell door closing below. Then I quickly opened my door. The security door of 903 was propped open with a rock. A woman from Thrins to probably yet. So, she hadn't completely shut it. Inside was a very neat and tidy apartment. The old grandma and her husband were curled up on the floor, pale-faced, but still breathing faintly. I grabbed a blanket and draped it over them, then brought over my spare cassette stove and heat packs. Seeing that they were finally waking up, I hurried back the way I came, helped close the door to 903, and returned to my own apartment. How should I deal with this next? His woman from Thriden let me off. Besides a direct confrontation, did I have any other options? The room was freezing cold. I fired up the cassette stove again, and as I watched the water gradually boil in the pot, a plan slowly formed in my mind. A day later, the woman from 300 to surely hadn't given up, and she came to my door again, because I had fully shut 903's door. She assumed I knew everything. She first knelt crying at my door, claiming that she was struggling too. When I gave absolutely no response, she pulled a knife from her coat and started hacking at my door. Seeing the time was right, I shouted from inside, "Stop hacking. If the door breaks, neither of us will survive." The woman for hanging the knife. I capitalized on the moment and asked, "What exactly do you want?" "I want to live in your apartment." "Are you kidding me? I will never agree to that." "Then at least, give me a cup of hot water. I'm thirsty. Let me drink, then we can negotiate. I've been surviving by licking ice every day. You can't blame me for wanting some hot water. If not, let's just drop it. Let's both freeze to death." I turned around, pretending to walk back inside. She hurriedly changed her tune, asking for a few packs of instant noodles and some frozen bottled water instead. Only then did I act extremely reluctant and agree. "How am I supposed to give it to you? How do I know you won't stab me if I open the door now? I'll go to the landing between the 8th and 9th floor. You leave the stuff out, then close your door." I pretended to hesitate for a bit before reluctantly agreeing. I made it sound like I was fetching supplies, but actually, I poured a basin full of melted water and walked toward the door. She had already retreated toward the stairwell. I took a deep breath and opened the door. The very instant I opened it, the woman lunged at me like a wild animal. But right at that moment, from 903, tossed one end of a rope out from her door. I instantly understood her intention and quickly grabbed my end of the rope. The woman was tripped hard, crashing heavily to the floor. I splashed the entire basin of water over her body and violently kicked her down the stairs. Having done all this, Grandma 903 and I quickly shut our doors. The water on her body must have already frozen solid. Without a heat source, the ice on her clothes would never melt. I returned to my tent, turned the cassette stove back on, and slowly closed my eyes. Outside, it was still snowing. I fell into a deep sleep. I don't know how long it had been, but a soft light suddenly flared before my eyes. The lights in my apartment, dead for so long, flickered back to life. The power was back, and the central heating slowly returned. The whole apartment started to warm up. I knew the extreme cold was finally over. When the community workers escorted me downstairs, one happened to see the paramedics carrying the completely immobilized woman onto a stretcher. It was then that I found out she wasn't the real owner of 302 at all, but rather the girl from that young couple who lived in room 202 and had come down to sweep snow. She and her boyfriend had zero supplies and hadn't even paid their heating bills. When the extreme cold hit, they were freezing to death. That's when they had a malicious idea. They squatted in the empty apartment, taking over room 302 as their own. Fortunately, the real family from 302 had gone to their hometown for the new year, so no one was hurt there. However, they weren't satisfied with that and began scavenging supplies floor by floor. Eventually, the boyfriend died in an accident on the 7th floor. The girl was left alone, continuing to pose as the building manager, tricking people and stealing their goods. She had even originally planned to pin all her crimes on me. But thankfully, it was all over now. Before they left, I made a small request to the police officers. I brought that magnolia sweater back to room 903. Grandma and Grandpa were sitting in their toasty room, drinking hot tea. Seeing me walk in, Grandma smiled and waved at me. "Shield, come here and warm up." The snow outside the window had finally stopped. The sunlight shone through the glass, warm and bright. Grandma insisted I stay for a meal. Grandpa cooked the food himself, filling an entire table. The three of us sat closely together, just like a real family. The temperature gradually climbed back up. The bitter winter had finally passed. In March, I finally returned to my hometown to see my parents. And we had a late, but exceptionally perfect reunion. Dine? I will never again worry about not getting a ticket and missing out on going home for the new year, because I know, from now on, every new year, no matter where I am, I will never be completely alone, because I have found a new family.